Hello, everybody. My name is Judy Wani, and I am a Luther College High School alumnus. Joining me today, I have fellow Luther alumni Victoria Alkalani and Matthew Nashawanya. We're joining today's chapel as just a few members of an organization called Black and Sask. Some of you may have already heard about us or follow us on different forms of social media. For those of you who may not know, we're a community organization that focuses on the holistic growth of the Black community here in Saskatchewan. On June 7th of this year, we actually spearheaded a Black Lives Matter rally at the Legislative Building, where we had well over 1,000 people in attendance. Since then, members of Black and Sask, in collaboration with other Black community organizations, facilitated meetings with the Mayor of Regina and City Councillors, the Regina Police Service, the Premier of Saskatchewan, and members of Legislative Assembly, and the Regina Catholic School Board of Trustees, where we focused on addressing systemic issues, providing opportunities for youth, and educating on Black experiences. For today's chapel, Matthew, Vicky, and myself will be talking about bullying in the form of microaggressions, systemic racism, and what it means to be an ally.
Thanks, Judy. Racism within our society is not what it used to be. However, it has not disappeared, it has simply changed. Along with blatant acts of injustice, racism has taken its form in what we now call microaggressions. Microaggressions are subtle statements or actions that can be discriminatory, and most of the time they're unintentional. For example, saying you're so pretty for a Black girl implies Black girls usually aren't pretty, but you're an exception. Things like touching a Black person's hair without consent, like they're a pet or an animal. And a more common act of racism is the use of the N-word, which historically is a racial slur used to degrade and abuse Black people and should not be used by any non-Black person. And finally, saying phrases like, I don't see color, not only disregards the Black experience, but the beauty that comes with it. These comments can happen casually, frequently, and often without any harm intended, but they can still affect one's mental health. For example, Caleb Schmidt was a victim of bullying in the forms of microaggression and the use of the N-word during his high school experience. This led him to take his own life in April of 2018. From elementary school, we are taught that bullying is bad and how to handle it. Although they feel the same, bullying and racism should be categorized differently. Although everyone can experience bullying, not everybody can experience racism. When a Black student experiences racism at school, it is not only an attack on their character or physical traits, but it is a reminder of their oppressed position in society. Black people are denied jobs, killed, and arrested based solely on their race. This plays a part into what we call systemic racism, which is what Matthew will be speaking more about.
Thanks, Vicky. I'm sure if you've been keeping up with the Black Lives Matter movement whatsoever that you've heard the term systemic or institutionalized racism, and you may be wondering exactly what it means, so I'll define it for you quickly. Systemic racism, and it's systemic, not systematic, is racism that exists within organizations or institutions in their policies, practices, or procedures which ostracize certain demographics of people. Some obvious examples of systemic racism are instances of legalized racial discrimination in the past, including slavery or segregated schools. But the issue is that many modern day examples of systemic racism aren't as explicit, especially if you're not a Black person or any person of color. But they still exist, from high unemployment rates and income inequality to the unjust overrepresentation of Black people within the prison system. This racism even exists in healthcare, in which outdated false beliefs are not explicitly addressed, leading to some healthcare workers genuinely believing that Black people are more resistant to pain because their skin is thicker and having their pain managed improperly. It seems ridiculous when I lay it out like that, but it's these kinds of aging false beliefs that quietly exist in healthcare settings that allowed a hospital to deny a Black man having a mental health crisis access to mental health attention on 2 occasions in the same day, despite his begging. Security escorted him out of the hospital and left him on his own, and he drowned himself later that same day in our very own Wascana Lake here in Regina on May 21st of this year. His name was Samuel Uko, and he is 20 years old. This story continues to break my heart because I work in a hospital every week, but primarily because it happened here, right in Regina, where I think I occasionally like to delude myself that this racism doesn't persist because I've lived a fairly sheltered life and went to school like Luther. So how do we address this kind of racism, whether it's individual or systemic? How can a non-person of color be an ally? And I think I'll share a story with you to explain. I'm a nursing student at the U of R, and during one of my clinical shifts, I had a patient state that they weren't comfortable with having a black person care for them the moment I was introduced, along with comments about my hair and my skin and, whatever. It doesn't bother me much as I've learned to brush this kind of thing aside and not let it get to me, but when I told my instructor, who was white, that I'd be better off switching patients, not only did my instructor speak to that patient privately, but she also pulled me aside to tell me that she believed I was excellent at what I did, that she believed that I was a strong student, and that the patient would have been blessed to have me care for them before finding me someone else. And that occasion will stay with me for the rest of my life because I believe it highlights what allyship is in its essence. It's active, right? It's activism, it's allyship. How easy would it have been for my instructor to shrug her shoulders, find me a new patient, go home and post her black square on Instagram or her 10-slide story about racism and move on with her day and forget about it. Instead, she used her voice to address the patient and provide me with affirmation, and the impact of that can't be understated. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Judy, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Vicky. Matthew posed a good question. How can a non-Black person be an ally? The reality is that it begins with education. So to teachers, provide your students with the proper resources. Start by retiring books written by white authors to speak on the Black experience, and instead introduce the literary works of Maya Angelou, Ta-Nehisi Coates, or even James Baldwin. Teach about the Harlem Renaissance, Tulsa's Black Wall Street, and pre-colonial Africa. Teach your students that Black history does not begin or end with slavery. As educators, it is just as important to highlight Black art, literature, and other positive Black contributions as much as we do Black suffering. Now, as for students, I urge you to continue to educate yourselves, ask questions. However, don't rely on your Black friends to be the spokesperson for their race. Read books, watch movies, and continue to immerse yourself in Black history and Black culture. At our rally, we noticed that there were some students from Luther in attendance, ranging from current students to alumni. I'd like to recognize and commend those students for standing in solidarity with us. As an ally, it's not enough anymore to just not be racist. You must be anti-racist. Recognize microaggressions and eliminate them. Be self-aware and understand that whether you have Black friends, are in an interracial relationship, or have Black family members, you as a non-Black person are still fully capable of being racist. So go as far as to challenge yourself. Be able to hold yourself accountable when you're being corrected for saying something racist. And understand that if you're not uncomfortable, you're not learning. Address what you can when you can, in whatever setting, be it in your classroom, at the dinner table, at a hospital, or at home. And when it's a larger systemic issue you can't change immediately, you advocate for policy change, you spread awareness, and you use your vote wisely, while keeping in mind that though you may feel that your impact is small, the collective voices of many are so powerful. I would like to thank you all for listening to us today. If you would like to keep up with Black and Sask, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Black and Sask. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns, anything at all, you can either DM us on those two platforms that I just named, or you can send us an email at blackandsask@gmail.com. Again, thank you so much for listening to us, and blessings on your day.